Hi, my name is Jackie Meyer. I'm the president and founder of Meyer Tax Consulting, a concierge CPA firm in Southlake, Texas, which is close to Dallas. Intuit has asked me to present a case study of a really cool new feature called QuickBooks Online Projects to you today. And it is really exciting to be one of the first to be able to show you these awesome benefits that projects can do for us. A little bit about my firm before we get started. Meyer Tax Consulting was founded about 8 years ago in 2010, and it's grown to about 7 staff members. Everyone works virtually, so I'm actually sitting in my home office at the moment. I do have an office that I meet with clients in as well, but we are very Intuit centric. I'm on the tax council for Intuit, which has been an amazing experience. And I'm also was Firm of the Future runner-up 2 years ago at QuickBooks Connect. Now, QuickBooks Connect is actually where I first saw the QuickBooks Online Projects feature 2 years ago in 2017, and I was in awe. I could not wait, not for my clients to use it, but selfishly for me to be able to use it for me and my firm. We are using really clunky Excel files, and I'll show you an example of that shortly, to track budget versus actual time. Now, 2 years ago, Meyer Tax Consulting completely converted our practice from hourly billing to value pricing. And so we converted our clients to a standard monthly fee based on tax strategies we could find for the client and a return on investment that we could find for that client. And so we need to be able to track what that value price is that we're billing a client month to month versus our actual hourly time. And that's what the project feature is able to do for us. It can be used across a lot of different industries, white collar industries like our field as accountants or medical practices. When I first heard about job costing, it was for construction industry and manufacturing, but it can actually apply across the board to a lot of white collar industries like ours as well. So as my firm grew and we converted to value pricing and were very successful with it, I was asked by other accountants to help coach them to become a firm of the future. And so I actually have a free Facebook group I would love for you to join me at called Accounting Firm Influencers. So just search for that, make sure and answer the question about if you are an accounting firm owner or influencer in the US. And there's over 2,000 accountants there where we're talking about topics just like this one every day. What's new, what's old, what's a pro and con of using like the projects feature. So I would love to see you there. I also was recognized for CPA Practice Advisors 40 under 40 this last year, which was quite the honor. And so I pride myself in being an innovative accountant in our industry and staying on top of the latest apps and features that are out there. Let's take a step back real fast and look at what exactly is job costing and how is QuickBooks Online going to help us with that. I know that being able to track the profitability of a job helps me sleep like a baby. And so there's a lot of questions that we can answer by using the projects feature. One, is a client's job profitable? What is the profit margin? Was the cost estimate accurate that we provided to the client? Are unexpected changes able to be identified early on in the process? Or are we going to have to write off that client after busy season, all that extra time we spent because we didn't take that extra time to proactively see that things were going sideways, like maybe they had a huge like-kind exchange transaction that occurred on their return that they didn't tell us about. Or they started a brand new business and have a sole proprietorship, Schedule C, that we didn't know about when we started the tax prep. I know it's happened to me in the past, and I don't want it to happen to you either, having to write off that extra time because you didn't have that discussion with the client. And so now we can proactively manage those things through our QuickBooks Online Project feature. I definitely encourage you as an accountant and valued, trusted advisor to your clients to test out the project feature, dive in, see it for yourself, and then of course analyze it for your clientele to see who could be a good fit as well. What industries out there are really going to appreciate this feature? I know I've had a lot of clients in the past asking me for this specific feature. Then you want to, of course, try to value bill or value price this new free, by the way, this is a free feature within QuickBooks Online Advanced and Plus. You can value price that service as an advisory service as you release it out to your clients as well. There's actually no additional cost for projects within QuickBooks Online. So now I want to introduce you to my handy dandy old friend, Excel, where we've been keeping track of our projects with our accounting firm clients and whether they go over or under budget. It's not pretty, and it's in fact quite embarrassing to share with you as my colleague, but between you and me, this is what it looked like. This is how we could tell month to month if a client was over or under the budgeted amount of time on their value priced invoice. So we'll walk through a couple of examples of client G and client R in just a moment, where you'll see how QuickBooks Projects is replacing Excel. Within QuickBooks Online, you simply click on the projects link to your left, and you can see a nice overview screen of all the projects that your company is working on. And in this example, we have a construction company client of mine that we have several different projects going on. And there's different statuses you can look at, whether it's in progress, completed, or canceled project. You can search for a particular project, you can narrow down by customer, or you can create new projects from here as well. And creating a new project is very simple. You click on the new project button, you name it whatever you like. And so I actually name it, if this was my accounting firm, based on the package type that the client is. So they might be a basic, pro, or elite package client. And so you would type in something this extent where it's their annual tax engagement, and then you link it to the customer that it goes to. You can also add notes, which will then show up within the detailed project screen. And once you create the project, it will show up this detailed overview for that particular engagement. Now, there are a few limitations to discuss here. First of all, prior invoices, prior time entries, and things that you might want to add to this project are not going to automatically reallocate to a brand new project screen. So what I've been doing is, as a client has been reaching their annual renewal of their tax engagement, that's when I'm starting a new project and then linking the invoices, time entries, and anything that happens in the future to that. So let's go back to our projects overview screen and talk a little bit more about that. We see these nice line items for income and costs. And my favorite column is the profit margin column, because you can quickly scroll through, see if something's gone in the negative, and then click into that particular project to see an overview of what's going on. So in this case, we have cabinet income for Marvin's room of $1,500. This links to an invoice that was set up for that project. And I'm going to go ahead and hop over to that invoice so that you can see how this is being linked up. You actually go to the customer, and then a project is created as a sub-client, so to speak, of that customer within QBO. And so that's how it knows to link it to that particular project. It's a little different from what you might have expected. It's a little different from what I expected when I first started. So I wanted to point that out. So we have $1,500 invoice, but we have a lot more than that in expenses. So not only is this going to pull in payroll expenses for me for my staff's time, it's also going to pull in other expenses that your company has, whether something that you get reimbursed from the client for or not. And so in this example, we have some bank charges and fees, And then we have quite a bit of wages and tax expenses. This is where it gets really cool. If you use QuickBooks Online Payroll, it will automatically allocate your staff members' wages, payroll taxes, and overhead costs for that staff member to the project, including, workers' compensation and all the payroll taxes that would be associated to that particular entry. And so it's telling us that we have a negative profit here of about $1,000. We can actually drill into this even further. So there's different tabs we can look at. There's a transactions tab that shows us all of the recent transactions that occurred for this particular job. We've got our time activity, which we can view by month or week or the service type, and then drill into those. Many of these screens actually have the ability to export that information. Like the last project report tab, if we view our project profitability report, we can actually export that to Excel, just like we're used to doing with any other reports in QuickBooks Online. So if we want to further manipulate this data, it will be there for you. There is a limitation. If you're not a QuickBooks Online Payroll user, your profitability reports are not going to show you your staff's time entries. So please be aware of that. We will still be able to see the time cost per employee or vendor report. So we see our Mick Jagger and Kendrick Lamar, some good singers that recorded some time here. And then the last report is our unbilled time and expense report. And so this will show up whether you use QuickBooks Online Payroll or not. It just won't associate those costs until you run a payroll in QuickBooks Online Payroll to our project profitability report. So it is time to talk to our team about why our expenses are exceeding our invoicing and if we need to approach the client about those cost changes. You can also drill down into the expenses from the project overview screen. And so now we see a report of all the various expenses related: bank charges and fees, the payroll expenses, taxes, wages, and the total. Let's switch gears now to an example of a client at my accounting firm to analyze their budget versus actual time, or their income minus costs, and what kind of net profit we have on that job. So this is client G, and G is on what's called our Pro package, which is quarterly tax estimates, annual tax preparation, and a quarterly bookkeeping review. They have their own internal bookkeeper that does their bank recs within QBO, and then we kind of take it from there. So looking at my profit margin, I see there's a bit of a problem here. Now, this is a client that we converted over from hourly work into value pricing just recently. If we drill into our income, you can see that their first invoice was February 1st of this year, and they're now on our Pro package for $1,340 a month. So they've been invoiced twice now for that annual engagement, February and March, for $1,340 each, totaling $2,680. Now we have to think about what season of the year we're in and how we would analyze this information. So we know that we are very close to April 15th tax filing time. And so whether this client, we have everything in to actually prepare their tax return, or if we're doing an extension estimate, either way, we want to factor that in as we're looking at an overview of the time that's been involved for the client. So our hourly time costs, and by the way, in this example of my firm, we don't use QuickBooks Online Payroll, and so it's not going to automatically pull in the wage and tax information. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people that still want to utilize and optimize this project feature out there that are just like me. And so I wanted to show you a real life example here. So we have our hourly time costs. So Veronica is our tax manager, And so I can actually drill into any of these line items and see what's going on. So in February, it looks like I had initial client meeting and set up the client in our system. So that wasn't too much time comparative to what we billed in February. But a lot of activity occurred in March. There's a work in progress on their tax returns, and then our tax manager reviewed the returns. And then there's an odd entry here that's marked non-billable, assisting for 8 hours with their QuickBooks file. Now that might or might not be out of scope of the services that we provide to this client, and it looks like that's what's really pushing our time over budget. And so this would be a really great point to discuss this with my staff and contact the client to figure out if we need to adjust their value pricing engagement, or if this was maybe a one-time event, or it could have been an error on my staff's end with something that happened in the QuickBooks file that they were correcting or making right. And so that's why they had it marked non-billable. But it's very easy to tell that we have a negative profit margin and negative profit on this client's engagement so far this year. It's also pulling in a couple of different expenses for me. Let's click on the expense hyperlink. And we see that we have a credit card processing fee for their online invoicing of 3% that we do pass on to our clients. And so that's on their invoice showing that reimbursed request amount that the client paid us. And then we see the outgoing payment made to QuickBooks. And so there's a little bit of a difference here that I'm not going to worry too much in regards to credit card fees. There's also a couple of reimbursements, other reimbursables that we requested from this client. It looks like we paid a state fee on their behalf and then received that reimbursement. So this is a really cool way to be able to see what expenses associated to that client and make sure that any reimbursements have been paid. Because here we have an e-filing fee for 1099s that were filed in January on their behalf for $16.52 that we passed through the client. But the associated expense in QuickBooks Online in my firm's file is not showing up. And so what I could do is go search for that expense. If I go up to the top right corner, we'll pop in our $16.52 and see what is going on here. So it looks like we have an expense that is coded to the IRS, which is not correct. And the description was actually for our e-file software. So I'm going to go ahead and change this over to the correct category, client reimbursables, and I'm going to associate it to the appropriate project. Now, in the past, we've actually used classes to track what staff member is assigned to a particular client for an overview of our entire firm's profit and expenses on client jobs. You can continue to do that if you don't have QuickBooks Online Payroll. If you want to see a more high-level view of where the firm stands, all of Jennifer's clients total $100,000 worth of sales, and she has $60,000 worth of time and expenses against that. That's where class tracking comes into play. But what's neat is that with QuickBooks Online Payroll involved, you're able to completely replace that class tracking need, and you can reallocate your classes to other needed items. So let's save and close out of this expense that we've now correctly linked over to that project. And now when we go back to our overview screen for this client, we see that our dues and subscriptions, which were our client reimbursables that should net to zero, actually do now. And so all of the reimbursements that we needed from the client and the associated expenses are allocated correctly to this account. Looking at the old way that we would track this information in Excel, we have the actual time spent in February and March. We have our budget or the value priced time of $13.40 a month. And then each month we would kind of see a breakdown of being under budget in month 1 and over budget in month 2. And then we might have a few notes here about things including reimbursements, but it doesn't really break down a lot of the details as to what was reimbursed and why. So now we can see all of that detail from our project overview screen. Under the Project Reports tab, we can go and see what our unbilled time and expenses are. So it looks like there was some time in here that we haven't yet written off for our value priced client engagement. If you also have T-Sheets, the integration is pretty neat. You can tag a project within T-Sheets itself, and then approved hours from your timesheet will flow over into QuickBooks Online Payroll. It's definitely the most thorough way to analyze employee costs to a job. I'm excited for you to jump in and try out the QuickBooks Online Projects feature for yourself. And then, of course, see what clients you might be able to apply it out to and what value-added services that you can bring to the engagement. Remember, if you have QuickBooks Online Payroll, it will actually tie back or allocate the payroll taxes and payroll itself to the project and to those custom reports for that job. You'll actually no longer need class tracking for job costing, and it now frees up those classes for other uses. You can also easily click over to the Time Activities tab within projects to see who's been working on what and how it affects your costs. If your QuickBooks Online company does not use QuickBooks Online Payroll, you can still use class tracking per employee for total work of that employee, but use the project screen for each client's budget, quote unquote, budgeted time, which is our value priced fixed fee versus the actual time involved. That replaces that clunky Excel tracking and gets rid of all these duplicate places that we're keeping track of all of this information and streamlines us into that one place within our Intuit ecosystem. I appreciate you diving into QuickBooks Online Projects feature with me today, and I'm really excited for you to dive in and use it for yourself.